It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to tonight's reading of Hammer of the Dogs by my father, Jarret Keene. To set the stage for you all, I will be reading a brief summary of the story. Set in the wasteland of dystopian Las Vegas, Hammer of the Dogs is a literary adventure filled with high-octane fun starring 21-year-old Lash. With her high-tech skill and warrior mentality, Lash is a master of her own fate as she helps to shield the Las Vegas Valley's survivors and protect her younger classmates at a paramilitary school holed up in Luxor on the Las Vegas Strip. When she's captured by the enemy warlord, she's surprised by two revelations. He's not the monster her headmaster wants her to believe he is, and the one thing she can't safeguard is her own heart. Hammer of the Dogs celebrates the courageousness of a younger generation in the face of authority. It's a story of transformation and maturity as Lash grapples with her own identity and redefines the glittering Las Vegas, Nevada is known for. And now I hand it over to Jarret Keene.
Okay, Lash is out to hijack a giant mine saw in North Las Vegas, and she's got her crew with her, Dio and Bathory. They're in the RV with the trailer, and they're about to have a lot of fun. This is Chapter 12. The highway leading to the mines was extensively damaged. The feds had used it in vain attempts to exert control over the mineral extraction and reclamation plants. They badly misjudged the fury of 2 million people trapped in the valley. With little water and no food other than skimpy FEMA emergency shipments that the desperate police, with advanced knowledge of the drop zones, intercepted and used to enforce submission. Eventually, people gave up on the drops, learning to subsist on desert shrubs and rage, or they died. Metro Police, which had become increasingly militarized post 9/11, had tanks and drones to thwart Washington's advances. The battles were insane. Lash deemed this the only good thing about her father dying early on. He was never forced to cut deals with drug cartels, only to end up killed by Uncle Sam lobbed bunker busters a year later. With the cops defeated, the Fed's command chain roiled by assassinations in D.C., and the libertarian militia leading to secure mineral lode in California, the vacuum let Prof and Richter step in and carve up the valley. Neither warlord, Lash wasn't so naive as to deny Prof's true status, cared about road maintenance. Streets were for common citizens and thugs. Prof was clearly disinterested in what happened on byways as long as general order was kept and people didn't tamper with water, power, food. The elite conducted business remotely, in the air and over the desert. It was a largely open secret that the cartels also supplied tech to the academy. In exchange, Prof gave drug lords access to the abandoned bases, black ops centers, and the test site. The cartel, serving China, Canada, and Western Europe, dreamed of enriching uranium to irradiate the Ukrainian mob. The test site, for instance, stored waste that had never made it to a proposed dump at Yucca Mountain. An older student, now dead, had shared a particular nugget of information with Lash. Every few years for hardware, Prof graduated a student to work under drug lords and assassinate rival gangs. But now the Academy had a plan to save Las Vegas. It involved hacking a colossal mine saw to eradicate once and for all its rivals. Bathory was sliding her tablet into its protective case when Dio hit another pothole. The computer slipped from her hands and struck the floor, the screen foobarred in one corner. The younger girl looked at Lash, grimacing with concern. "Sorry." "Damn, Dio," Lash said. "More than welcome to repave this road," he said. "Sure, then you can replace Bathory's tablet." "What? Come on, guys. Hold on to things, please." Lash asked Bathory, "Fixable?" "It's a workaround." She opened the command menu, checking for touchability issues. Lash saw that the corner button Defend was problematic. "Here," said Lash, offering her tablet. Bathory shook her head. "Mine's customized." "Suit yourself," Lash said. She put her gear away and glossed the screens. I have a question, yes." "Richter's not jamming us back, why?" "He wants the excavator," Lash explained. "He's already at the mine." "The blimps were a diversion?" Lash didn't respond to the reminder that she'd taken on the military and blown whatever time advantage they might have had. But she still didn't want to burden Bathory with that information. Picking at a scab on her elbow where Coons' tooth had broken skin days prior, she lied. Likely the Zeps were an effort to draw us out and reveal our location. Dio hit another pothole, garbling Bathory's response. So she reached into her bag and took out a bag of dried meat. Gives pet food a whole new meaning, she said, handing over the largest slice. Lash bit into the jerky, trying not to act starved. I hear you chewing, Dio intercomed. Can I have some, please? It's scorpion, warned Lash, her mouth full. Doesn't meat gag you? Bugs ain't meat, Dio insisted. They're crunchy and protein-rich. Fine. She looked at Bathory and put out her hand, on which the redhead placed another strip. Lash dug her other hand into a cabinet crawling with Korean-made grenade bots. Finding one with an onboard camera and magnetic claws, she placed the jerky in its pincers. She opened the blast-resistant sunroof to scoop the lobster-like bot across the trailer top. Bathory laughed when Lash switched on the bot cam. They watched the TNT-encrusted crustacean scuttle down the trailer's front end, across the hitch, over and around the vampire crates, and through the truck's gun rack. Pothole impacts enhanced the humor of the bot's bumbling progress. Camera footage always seemed to add weight to people, and with his Kevlar on, Dio looked even more rotund, to Lash anyway. Order up, she said. Dio flinched when he saw the bot in the passenger seat. He exhaled loudly. Not funny. Don't worry, she teased. It's scorpion jerky, not a release pin. He took the dried meat from the bot's pincers and stuffed it into his mouth. Good, Bathory asked. I prefer the garlic, he said. What about you, Lash? She was looking at something unrelated on the monitors. Behind them was a black Toyota 4Runner. It too towed a sat dish trailer. Painted on the hood was Richter's insignia, a white jawless skull with an anarchy symbol on the brow. She spotted a mounted XM395 precision RPG. In seconds, it would be so close that jamming couldn't save them. Drive, said Lash, voice trembling. What do you think I'm doing, Dio said. Eating scorpion? Go faster. Chapter 13. Lash triggered the bride's heat scope on the station keyboard, but Richter's infra-jamming technique was so gnarly that the virtual targeting froze up. Frustrated, she went handheld and toggled the joystick to wrench her drone out of spoof default. It failed. Above the Academy truck, the bride circled slowly, unresponsive to any command. Richter's goons had toppled Lash's chessboard queen. Now they were coming for her head. Unaware of the approaching RPG, Bathory crowed. Their drones are so down, so easy. Lash glared at her with such contempt that the younger girl instinctively brought her knees up to her chest, as if about to endure a beating. Lady, said Dio. His sudden acceleration suggested he'd seen the rocket. Little help? On it, Lash said. With no options left, she grabbed the M4 and rifle-butted the unlatched sunroof wide open. Holding the shotgun vertically, she pushed it up and through, twisted, and used it to muscle up, lifting herself over the improvised bar and on top of the trailer. Wind buffeting her, she crosshaired the 4Runner. It braked, backing down momentarily. Soon Richter's goons would zoom at her again when they saw she didn't have an RPG. She planned on having one ready when they did. But she needed another minute. She turned to snatch the grenade bot that had been retracing its path to the trailer sunroof. She accessed it via print scan, amped its magnetic and explosive levels, pulled the pin and tossed it, and then she headed toward Dio. The once clownish bot instantly transformed into a grim decimator. Hurtling through the air, it spasmed its black pincers like a malevolent tarantula, landing on the 4Runner's windshield and slowly crystallizing the glass. Richter's men were prepared and shotgunned the spider through the windshield, which sent the bot spiraling forward. It detonated a millisecond later, 10 yards in front of the truck. Shrapnel rained on them, slivering the headlights and causing the driver to graze the charred skeleton of a minivan and tailspin. He regained control but lost ground. Lash had anticipated the sequence of events and gained the time she needed to clamber the length of the trailer, leaping onto the vampire crates strapped to the flatbed. Her gun's sawtooth breaching tool butter-sliced the wood panels. She'd shoulder-strapped and armed the launch tubes months ago, so she took two and carefully stepped across the hitch. But then Dio called, "Hang on," as he swerved to evade a sinkhole she might have been thrown off the trailer had she not gripped its ladder. The vampires were heavy and banged her vertebrae. She blocked out the pain and climbed on top in time to see the 4Runner coming within 100 yards. GPS was useless and there was no time to aim properly. So she swung around the first two, mounted it against her shoulder, and clicked off the safety. "I am your hammer god," she said, pulling the trigger. The mortar missed, shrieking above the Forerunner, but the surprise of it, along with the rocket's profuse vision-obscuring trail of ignition smoke and the impact of a pothole full of scrap metal, resulted in a blown front tire. Richter's men slowed to a useless creep as the tread unspooled completely to reveal a bare rim. Lash climbed down through the sunroof. She pulled a stick of gum from her cargoes and asked Bathory, "How's my baby?" I'm fine." She gazed at the vampire leashed to Lash's back, her face changing from repulsion to attraction. "I meant the bride." "Oh," Bathory checked the connection indicator. "She's back. Jammer's out of range." "Great. Dio, how far?" 5 miles. The sun had disappeared. The bride's night vision functioned beautifully. They could locate Kuhn's lickety-split, but Richter-led ambushes enjoyed a higher success rate in the desert's total darkness. Dawn would be more advantageous for Lash's team. "How's Kuhn's?" "All jammed up, but he has his crossbow." Kuhn's crossbow was one of his better concepts. It shot an arrow that generated a short-range electromagnetic pulse burst on impact. The burst fried microchips within a predetermined radius, turning a losing cyber war or drone battle into a stalemate. It wasn't in Lash's nature to appreciate a draw. Lash had done Kuhn's one better by taking his EMP idea, miniaturizing it, and sticking it onto a needle drone, producing a flying hypodermic that injected poison milked from a blue-ringed octopus into a target. The squid had been pilfered from the seafood merchants of Shark Reef Aquarium. The venom caused instant paralysis, killing in seconds. Once the plunger depressed, a short-range EMP surge wiped out any drone wearer on the victim. Lash's stealthy syringe UAV ensured that another mercenary couldn't pick up a fallen comrade's tablet and continue droning. She always got a little kick to think that her improvisation really needled Kuhn's. "Tell him not to use the crossbow. Cavalry arrives at sunrise." "Pulling over now," Dio said. Bathory applied ground-penetrating radar to the area. "Head due west, caves looks like." Dio heeded her and stopped in front of a cluster of rock formations. Lash was ambivalent about caves. They made escape impossible, but they also lowered heat signatures during the day and reduced the bite of the desert's cold wind after dark. All in all, it was a good night for a cave. She and Bathory exited the trailer. The younger girl stretched while Lash and Dio covered the truck and trailer with signal-masking tarp. "Extra tarp, please," she said. "Why?" "Coffee." "Not out here," Dio said. "In the cave, of course. Hey, what's your problem? You love my brew." "You need rest, Lash." He handed her a roll of material. "When have you known me to sleep?" "I'll be in the trailer," Dio said. I get cranked just smelling your Java." After retrieving her duffel bag and gun, Lash stepped into the mouth of the cave. She clicked her Zippo and looked for tracks or any signs that an animal had used the shelter recently. There were none. Inside, it was critter-free, only sand, rocks, her own flickering, distortion-bending shadow. The cave was big enough not to have to worry about eating up all the oxygen with a fire and asphyxiating. She went outside and used her gum to tarp cover the entrance, then saw-toothed an olive tree limb. Back inside, she used an old issue of Playgirl for kindling. She roasted the beans in the mamas like her Iranian neighbor, Mr. Ali Hamad, had taught her. At first, her mom had been suspicious about why an elderly taxi driver was teaching a teenage girl how to make coffee, like a Bedouin tribesman. Lash knew the old man was just tired of hearing her throw knives against the wooden fence between their houses. Figured he should teach her a quieter, more useful skill, like making strong Arabic coffee. She was grateful for his gift as well as his protection in the days following the collapse. This most recent batch of Sumatra came from an Arizona family that had bartered with her after she replaced their car battery. The beans roasted well and she ground them with a coffee mortar and pestle. When the water was hot, she poured it over the coffee. It smelled so good she wanted to wake Dio now with a cup. Sipping the steaming brew, she tried and failed to compartmentalize the mass injuries and deaths she'd inflicted on Las Vegas. 5 years earlier, when a drone-launched hellfire carnaged her life in the refugee camp in Boulder City, she'd considered drone pilots chicken shit thrill killers who derived ghastly kicks from watching defenseless victims explode on camera. Gradually, after enrolling in the academy, learning to remotely pilot missile-laden aircraft herself, and witnessing the killing of others by her own hand, she became not only inured to causing psychological and physical harm, she actually embraced the practice of digital aggression towards strangers. Then again, maybe she embraced nothing. Compulsion was a better explanation. She knew little of the early 20th century Austrian psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, but she'd stumbled onto his theory of the death drive in a musty old book, Beyond the Pleasure Principle, from her father's library. Searching for dirty sex parts, she'd encountered an upsetting idea. Freud had observed how shell-shocked soldiers returning from World War I tended to repeat, reenact, and consistently dream of their traumatic experiences. It symbolized the desire to move from an organic to an inanimate state, from order to oblivion, from life to death. The death drive's fullest expression was in the collective instinct toward the destruction of the world. Freud was onto something. What else were drones but the embodiment of man's ceaseless hunger for self-annihilation? Drones were especially pernicious because they added a technological filter between the Cain and Abel ritual. Through a screen, everything was reduced to a fantasy, a game. The cyber eye of a vengeful machine wasn't the pilot's to pluck out. A pilot was playing a role, doing his job. The computer really did it, was the compartment into which a remote killer routinely placed his or her guilt. Drone pilots never admitted it, but it was how they went to bed every night and slept the sleep of the just. She was about to turn on the UV lamp for a D vitamin charge when Bathory entered the cave wearing black Academy-issued pajamas and Lash's pink and white Hello Kitty slippers. They were dirty and scuffed now. "Can I try your coffee, please?" Lash forced a smile, poured the dregs past the girl the tin cup, and watched her squint. "Ugh," said Bathory, handing it back. "Tastes like bitter earth. Keeps me awake." "You don't sleep?" "No." "Too many nightmares?" "Not enough dreams," Lash said. Chapter 16. Coons was an Academy valedictorian, his grades higher than Lash's. When they built solar bots, Coons was peerless, estimating angles and inputting operations data. His bots were flawlessly constructed and smoothly programmed. Lash's drones hiccuped, stalled, and tended to burst into flames. In the arena, however, her bots, despite their quirks and handicaps, routed anything Coons put forward. Her school rival had a sensible design genius, while she had a realistic killer instinct. He could build a wicked bot, but couldn't handle it as lethally as she did. The big reason Lash abhorred Coons? His interest in tech was competitive and passionless. Claiming good intentions, he really just wanted to outdo everyone, especially Lash, and make them look bad in Prof's eyes. Killing savage, valley-draining non-believers like Richter was a means to an end, not the end like it was for Lash. They needed each other now, which is why Prof had smiled so strangely when giving her this mission. There was no way Lash could have hacked an excavator herself, and no chance Coons could fight his way out of the mines while remotely steering an ogre razor. If they were to achieve success, they needed to yin-yang their strengths together. "Signs of Richter?" she asked, as Coons led her to his ops center Bobcat. It was parked on the other side of the debris mound, tucked behind crates. A miner's four-wheel Heister forklift, presumably hacked, yet dead from jamming, baked in the sun 10 yards away. The drone disruptor box, an EMP crossbow, sat on a big, red, flat-topped igloo cooler. Towering in the sky and rooted in the adjacent and much deeper trench was the excavator. A boom box blasted AC/DC's If You Want Blood. Bon Scott's pub-crawling ladies' man screech not loud enough to drown out the buzz overhead. Coons loved hard rock and metal, too. "No," he said, "his goons are all over this dust hole, though." "Shoot any?" "One, in the butt. He snagged a tripwire flare near the excavator sometime after midnight." "You have flares?" "Design them in chemistry," he bragged, "your weakest subject." "Sure, that's right. Dio tell you we encountered blimps?" Coons shrugged, not convinced they were for the excavator or that they were Richter's. "Whatever," said Lash, annoyed. "Let's start from the top. Gas. Heavy diesel, enough to get home, but we'll have to synthesize something for the assault." "Power. Look, can we skip this? It's operational, Lash." She sighed. "Completely? Can you just arm it? We need to move." "Oh, I'll arm it after you tell me the auto-destruct code." "Lash, Coons, we're not destroying it," he said. "You know the risk." "What risk?" He checked his blonde feathered hair in the Bobcat's scratched-up blind spot mirror. "It's all voice command anyway. I'm the sole operator." "You must have an Ebola-grade fever. No way you're firing my rockets." Coons shot her his best "don't bust my balls" look. "Okay, tell you what. You and Dio install the tank busters. I'll give you a destruct password in your own suitcase downlink. You can chuck grenades at will." "Thank you so much, Coons," she said sarcastically. Of course, she had no intention of letting him operate the excavator either. She would break that news to him later. "You'll thank me for something else after we've taken control of the excavator and blasted our way out of here. I have a proposal." "Is that so?" Coons nodded. His humorless expression piqued her curiosity. But she was tired and wanted this mission finished. "No more games." She indicated the forklift. "Manual?" "Yes, but don't overload it. The fork sticks when you pile on more than a half ton." "Okay." She hopped into the Heister and turned the ignition key. The puny eco whine of an electric motor was an affront to her ears. Seriously, she said, shaking her head at Coons, you're a frickin' hippie. It's all I could find. Place was stripped. You know, maybe I should tell you. She accelerated before he could finish, just to piss him off. It would take an hour to get the RPGs into the trench. Time was critical. If Richter saw Prof's top students gathered in one location, he'd send more enforcers, large 20-year-old males with mutilating inclinations. With the bride and grenade bots jammed, Lash didn't look forward to hand-to-hand. Spine and evened-out forklift grew with reduced incline. She happily went for it. Here we go. In minutes, she reached the truck. Visor, Dio was welding a gyro mount to a launch tube under the infrakill tarp. Bathory was heating up more javelina under electric stove. Save me some, Lash said. But this one's a carnivore, said Dio, flipping up his welding mask. Bathory smiled and sprinkled some kind of improvised seasoning on the meat. Smells good, Lash said. She patted Dio on the back. Together they resealed the vampires, then dragged and heaved and stacked the crates onto the forklift. Lash was sweating now. Hate to say it, Dio said. Go on, Lash said. She grabbed her duffel bag and stuffed it under the lift's seat. Quiet. Before the storm? Maybe, Dio said. Coon set any alarms? Tripwires. Dio nodded, then looked over at Bathory. Seems to be working out. Don't ever doubt me. She smiled, but then an overcast expression settled in. Lash, I want you to know that I'm awesome, she said, turning away. She frowned and shook her head. What was with these guys all of a sudden? Plenty of time after securing the excavator for sweet nothings from admirers and antagonists alike. She got back in the forklift and drove into the trench. Going downhill, the electric engine didn't bother her so much. She laughed when she had to hit the brakes to keep from rolling forward and over. The bungee cords were tightly wrapped around the RPGs, but were still elastic enough that she stopped several times to make sure she didn't damage anything. Hunger scraped her stomach as she thought of Bathory saving more pork. For a moment, Lash imagined the younger girl sucking the hot meat down to the bones and mangled bits of fire-roasted, sage-seasoned skin, but then tried to block out the gustatory fantasy. When she arrived at the Bobcat, Coons had moved his boombox around the corner of the mound out of sight. She heard him singing along to Cinderella's Coming Home. His hair metal power ballad wail had improved, she'd give him that. Oddly, she sensed Coons was mocking the lyrics and the singer's strident falsetto. I'm back, she called out, exiting the heister and popping some gum into her mouth. She left the M4 and Vampire strapped on her shoulder along with her duffel bag, with rockets. Then a man in Kevlar and SWAT gear, and wielding a Mossberg gun and with a black motorized snakebot slithering around his neck and shoulders, stepped around the corner. The man whose voice she'd heard and not Coons's. A dark, lean enemy whose merciless visage was engraved in her imagination from years of watching Academy snuff feeds again and again. Scenes in which he brutally drone-splattered Prof's best and brightest. Images and sounds that proved him to be the most despicable individual in bombed-out Las Vegas. Lash had never seen Richter up close. She was frightened, stock still, a headlit deer. She swallowed her gum. Richter pointed his weapon at her and grinned. The talking robo-pistol announced to its owner and Lash, "Pretty girl, go bye-bye." Chapter 17, Lash closed her eyes and waited for the bullet to rip her in half. It never came. Now, Richter gently scolded, we can't have that. Thinking he'd addressed her, she tried to look at him, but was too petrified. Then she realized Richter was responding to what the weapon had uttered seconds earlier. No bang bang, the smart gun queried with its spooky lobotomized android intonation. Moss, you don't shoot a rare and precious jewel like Lash, not until she gives you reason. It might have been a spine-chilling ventriloquist act, except that the weapon's volume was so cranked there could be no mistaking the chip-spawned speaker source. Finally, she succeeded in looking at Richter. He was no longer aiming the gun at her. Even with her heart pounding out of her chest, she could see that he physically resembled a young telenovela star with weapons and armor instead of a sports car and glamorous clothes. It was difficult to return his hooded gaze, but she managed to say, "How do you know me?" The conversation with your classmate, said Richter, helped immensely. She looked past him, leaning forward to search for Coons, but all she saw was a smashed disruptor, which meant only Bathory was keeping Richter's drones at bay. Where's Coons? She demanded through her terror. Is that his name? He's MIA. But speaking of names, Richter went on conversationally, it wasn't the first time I'd heard the name Lash. You've made waves lately. Was that you stalking me in the meadows? The snake bot moving along Richter's frame raised its vidcam head, directing its full consideration on her, lens turning to focus. Richter was doubtless recording the encounter to taunt the Academy with gruesome images of yet another student slain. No, he admitted, but my pilot brought the video of your escape to my attention. You're a scrappy, resourceful young woman. Your favorite kind to shoot, right? Bang, bang, the mech rifle blurted in agreement. Hush, Moss. Lash, you don't trouble me. I admire you. She couldn't believe her ears, stunned, speechless, though for only a moment. What is it about me you think you admire? If she was going to die on camera, she might as well go out sounding tough. Richter smiled. I have so much to share with you. First, let's move the excavator. Can't. You killed the bot's only command source, which is the only way to override our jamming. Stalemate, I'm afraid. Richter shook his head and, without smiling this time, leveled the smart gun at her again. You mean this source? The voice emanating from the weapon was now precisely Coons's. Stunned again, Lash stood silent. What kind of nightmare was this? A sentient robo-pistol that was also an audio simulator? It pretzeled her brain to guess how he'd scored it or made it. Richter was no longer looking at Lash. Something behind her was drawing his attention. She turned to see that Dio had driven the truck to the lip of the crater. His face was visible through the windshield, and she could clearly see that what he was observing concerned him deeply. He slammed into reverse, tires slinging gravel into the hole, much of it landing on Lash and Richter. Richter raised the weapon to point it at the truck. Lash's heart skipped a beat, then another. To her relief, the smart gun took out the Ops Center's disruptor dish on the trailer roof. The sound was like glass tinkling. The Academy's jamming waves were now smothered. Good job, Moss, said Richter, appreciatively. Wagon train, the weapon commanded once more, stealing her dead classmate's voice. High in the air above them, the excavator wrenched itself to life, dragon-like, with a hefty exhalation of greasy smoke and a cosmic groan of metal scraping metal. Its blade began spinning. Treads started gnashing the desert. The ground beneath Lash's boots quaked. The wind picked up, grew violent. Lash saw dust devils spinning wildly in the trench she and Richter occupied. It was as if a storm had joined the apocalyptic frenzy he'd unleashed. How exactly, she had no earthly notion. Gunfighter, Coons's amplified ghost cluck took on a mocking, menacing edge. The excavator swerved its bladed boom arm across the pit, descended and paused directly over Dio's puttering, still trying to escape truck, a guillotine poised to sever a housefly. No, she begged, remembering her promise to Bathory, please. Just as suddenly, the boom raised, allowing Dio and Bathory to reach Pabco Road and flee. A flying condor bot swooped in, landing on Lash's back. Metal talons ripped the M4 vampire and duffel bag from her shoulders, cutting her favorite shirt and abrading her flesh. She could already feel the wounds starting to ooze. The bird pushed off into flight mode and pounded its fiberglass wings, leaving Lash disarmed and helpless before Richter. The Bobcat hummed next and began pushing the RPG-loaded forklift toward the excavator. Shirt torn, skin cut, she gazed at Richter dead on, waiting for his next move. It surprised her. Richter let his gun arm drop and held out his other hand, expecting her to take it. Ever ride a giant earth-moving machine straight into the heart of Las Vegas? Why should I trust you? Because I know things you don't, things you have every right to learn, but I can't teach you if you fester in a school that is in reality a prison camp, with Prof as your warden. Well, what should I learn? He stepped forward, still offering his hand, and said solemnly, where to find your father, for one. She moaned wretchedly, clutching her chest as if she'd been spear gouged, then fell to her knees. Tears erupted this time, and she couldn't quell them. Nausea plowed her guts with the force of a mallet. Inhuman wind knifed her eyes repeatedly with mind grit. At the same time, rage consumed her entirely, tearing down the fortress of her resolve. I, she gasped, kneeling, arms swathed across her churning stomach, eyes of burning hate aimed at Richter. Will kill you. You can certainly try, he said. Maybe you'll succeed. For now, though, we ride. He holstered the smart gun and stooped to pick her up. As he carried her in his arms, she was paralyzed and wanted to die. Then she yearned to live. She hadn't slept in 4 days. Crippled from exhaustion, she felt herself slipping behind the wall of sleep, or into her seizure. The last thing she saw before closing her eyes and falling into a dream state was Richter. He snatched the crucifix from her neck and pocketed it. Snakebot weaves across the limbs of a tree in a lush garden. Dio obeys a talking gun that Prof draws and reholsters and draws again at the front of a classroom of students. Richter sits alone on a blanket beside a stream, reading a book of Greek myths. Bathory drifts in a canoe on Lake Mead, ripping pages from a Bible and carefully placing each onion-skinned sheet on the water's surface. Lash, Coons wants to say something to you now, Lash. Live or die. Live or die. Live. And right before total and unmitigated slumber claimed her, she stood in the presence of her handsome father. He was dressed in his police uniform, ready to work another shift. He brushed her hair gently, softly with his calloused fingertips and kissed her cheek, his face soft and warm from having just shaved. He told her not to be afraid. Live, mija, he said. I want to thank all of you for coming out to support me. I want to thank the Writer's Block. I want to thank University of Nevada Press. I want to thank Nevada Humanities. I want to thank all of you in the grad program, in the UNLV English department. Carlos, Krista, you know who you are. Thank you so much for your support in the last year and a half. And please buy a book so I can write the second and third volume of this trilogy. I'm in conversations with movie producers this week and next. Yes. The producer responsible for Sharktopus 4 is very interested in Hammer of the Dogs, but you know what? I'm gonna take it seriously. And so, I just appreciate all of you coming out. It means a lot to me, especially on a Tuesday, September 12th, but it had to be tonight. It had to be the day of the release. And I love each and every one of you for coming out and being here. And so I'll be signing books there in the corner next to the Hammers, which is appropriate. And I'd love to catch up with you and give you a hug. So thank you.